Faced with the icy silence that modern humanity has conventionally called the end, consciousness trembles. It trembles not only from the instinctive fear of annihilation, but from a cultivated ignorance, a blindness imposed by centuries of arid materialism that has reduced the human being to a biological accident and the soul to a chemical secretion of the brain. But we live now in an era of rupture. The veil that separates the world of the senses from the world of causes is becoming ever thinner, torn not by ancient religious dogmas, but by human experience itself, which overflows the limits of medicine. What we will present here are not speculations. They are facts. They are what Rudolf Steiner, the great Western initiate and father of spiritual science, would call symptoms of the crossing, the 15 proofs of life after death that the secular world is beginning to catalog through thousands of near-death experience (NDE) accounts, are, in fact, the first visible footprints of our hidden constitution. They are the experimental validation that death is not a turning off of the lights, but a reverse birth, a solemn and structured emancipation of the spirit. In order for us to understand the magnitude of what happens when the heart monitor emits its continuous sound and medicine declares death, we must first strip our minds of the superstition that we are merely flesh. Anthroposophy teaches us, with the precision of sacred anatomy, that the human being is an orchestra of 4 interpenetrating bodies. We have the physical body, dense, mineral, subject to gravity, the etheric body or vital body, which is the architect of form and the bearer of memory, the astral body, the seat of our passions, pains, and sensitivity, and the organization of the self, the individualized divine spark. As you listen to me now, these 4 principles are rigidly coupled, screwed together to allow experience on earth. What we call death is technically only the sequential detachment of these sheaths, and it is precisely in the mechanics of this detachment that modern scientific evidence collides head-on with esoteric wisdom, revealing truths that can no longer be ignored. The first irrefutable proof, which defies all the logic of conventional neurology, is the phenomenon of displaced awareness, or objective verification. The materialist dogma states, "Without a brain, there is no mind." However, in operating rooms around the world, patients declared clinically dead, with blood flow ceased and zero cortical electrical activity, which technically means the absence of any data processing capacity, returned to life with visual and auditory accounts of terrifying precision. They describe the shape of the bone saw used by the surgeon, reproduce conversations that took place in distant corridors, and detail the frantic resuscitation attempt seen from an impossible angle, the ceiling. For the skeptic, this is a mystery. For the student of Steiner, this is the basic mechanics of the separation of the bodies. At the moment of fatal trauma, the etheric body, which is normally impregnated in every physical cell, loosens and expands outward, carrying with it the astral body and the ego. Steiner describes how, upon freeing ourselves from the cranial box, our senses do not disappear, they metamorphose. We cease to see through light reflected on the retina and begin to perceive through the psychic substance. The human being, floating above their inert shell, sees not with eyes, but with an omnidirectional consciousness. The brain, far from being the producer of consciousness, reveals itself as its reducer, a valve that limited perception to the physical spectrum. When this valve is destroyed or abandoned, consciousness does not dissolve. It floods the environment. The proof of objective verification is the death certificate of materialism. The mind exists despite of the brain and not because share. Immediately following this liberation, the second test emerges, a universal constant in the accounts of those who have crossed the threshold, the absolute cessation of pain and profound peace. Imagine a body shattered by a car accident or consumed by terminal cancer. The suffering is excruciating. In the next second, at the exact instant the vital link breaks, the pain instantly disappears, replaced by a lightness that human language fails to describe. Why would a collapsing nervous system generate peace? The answer lies in understanding pain. According to spiritual science, pain is the result of friction or disharmony between the astral body, sensation, and the damaged physical body. It is the cry of the astral body trying to adjust to matter that no longer responds. At the moment of death, the astral body detaches. The connection is severed. Without friction with dense matter, the soul experiences its intrinsic nature, which is serenity and light. Steiner reminds us that fear and agony belong to the instinct for self-preservation of the physical body. The soul, in itself, does not fear death, for in its depths, it knows that it is immortal. This sudden peace is not a chemical reaction. It is the sigh of relief of a prisoner whose chains have been suddenly broken. However, the newly liberated spirit does not immediately depart for the higher celestial spheres. It remains for a brief period that usually lasts about 3 days, enveloped in its etheric body, floating in the vital atmosphere of the earth. It is at this stage that the most majestic and artistically perfect phenomenon of death occurs. Our third trial, the panorama of life, or the etheric tableau. I saw my whole life flash before my eyes. This phrase has become a cliché, but its reality is a metaphysical marvel. During incarnation, the etheric body has the primary function of maintaining organic vitality, regenerating tissues, and storing memories. However, the physical brain acts as a temporal filter, forcing us to access these memories sequentially, one after the other, yesterday before today. At death, the etheric body is relieved of its biological tasks. All the energy used for digestion, heartbeat, and breathing is released and transformed into pure thought. Time, that linear tyranny, collapses and transforms into space. The human being sees their entire life not as a running film, but as a large panoramic picture where birth and death, childhood and old age are simultaneously present. Rudolf Steiner explains that this is the moment when man contemplates himself objectively for the first time. There is not yet the painful moral judgment, which will come later in the Kamaloka. There is only the clear and crystalline vision of who we were, of all the connections, of all the causes and effects we wove. It is proof that nothing is lost. Every thought, every secret intention, every forgotten act is engraved in the substance of the universal ether and is returned to us at the moment of passing. As consciousness adjusts to this new reality, we begin to realize that we are not alone. The fourth proof, the encounter with the deceased. This destroys the idea that death is a solitary sleep. Medical skepticism desperately tries to explain these visions as hallucinations caused by lack of oxygen or the release of endorphins. But this theory crumbles in the face of documented cases known as peak visions in Darien. I am referring to situations where the dying person, on the verge of death, reports with surprise seeing a relative who, according to everyone present in the room, was still alive and well in another city or country. Only days later is it discovered that that relative had died hours before the dying person's vision. How could a hallucination inform about a true and unknown fact? This requires real communication. From an anthroposophical perspective, this signals the opening of the astral senses. In the spiritual world, relationships based on true love and karmic destiny act as magnetic forces. There are no physical distances. To think of someone is to be with someone. Those who preceded us in death often wait in the vestibule of the spiritual world to assist in the transition, serving as midwives of the soul. They do not appear with their old physical bodies, but project a spiritualized image of themselves, a thought form to be recognized by the newcomer. Death does not break the bonds. It only removes the barrier of invisibility. As we delve deeper into our journey, we encounter the fifth test, perhaps the most transformative of all, the vision of the light or of the being of light. Described identically by atheists, religious people, and agnostics, this light is not the electromagnetic radiation of our physical sun. It is a light that possesses qualities of personality. It is intelligent, it loves, it welcomes, and it knows everything. Rudolf Steiner, in his profound esoteric Christology, gives us the key to this mystery. In the spiritual world, light is the clothing of wisdom. Goodness is not an abstract feeling. It is a radiant force. This being, which many identify as an angel, a guide, or Christ himself, acts as the guardian of the higher threshold. The most remarkable aspect of this proof, besides the vision, is communication. Accounts confirm that there are no spoken words. There is instantaneous and total thought transference. Questions are answered before they are formulated. Knowledge is absorbed in blocks of pure understanding. This validates Steiner's description of intuitive consciousness. In the spirit, we do not learn by analyzing from the outside in. We merge with the truth. To know something is to become one with it. And here, the physics of our world begins to completely dissolve. The sixth proof is the 360-degree vision, or spherical awareness. The repatriated individuals often struggle with words to explain that they could see forward, backward, up, and down simultaneously. They could see through things. In the physical world, our vision is perspectival. We depend on a vanishing point. We are bound to Euclidean geometry. But Steiner teaches that upon leaving the body, our consciousness tends to expand toward the periphery. We cease to be a point looking at the universe and become a sphere containing the observed universe. Local omnipresence becomes the norm. This radical alteration in the geometry of perception is impossible to fabricate for a brain designed for three-dimensional survival. It is proof that the soul belongs to a dimension where space is qualitative, not quantitative. Along with the collapse of space, we have the seventh piece of evidence, the non-existence of linear time. There, time doesn't exist, say the travelers. Everything happens in an eternal now. For theoretical physics, time is relative. For the spirit, time is an illusion of sequence. Steiner describes time in the spiritual world as duration, past, present, and future, like a seed, coexist in an organic structure. This is why many who return from an NDE bring with them premonitions or visions of the future that end up coming true. They didn't guess. They simply observed the architecture of destiny that already exists in the higher planes, the so-called Akashic records, where the future is being woven by the consequences of the past. The soul, momentarily free from the timeline, sees the complete landscape of its existence. Finally, we come to the eighth piece of evidence, which is the most enduring and humanly touching, the radical moral transformation. No one returns from the threshold of death the same person. The skeptic may argue about brain chemistry during the experience, But chemistry doesn't explain why, 20 years later, that person remains transformed. Ambitious, selfish, or materialistic individuals return with a total detachment from material possessions, an absolute loss of the fear of death, and an insatiable thirst for knowledge and service to others. Psychiatry has no pill to create sudden sainthood. Steiner would explain this as a natural initiation by touching the reality of the spirit. The illusion of Maya, the belief that the physical world is the only reality, shatters. The person has seen their true homeland. They know that life on earth is a brief school, and that the final exam is not about how much we accumulate, but about how much we love. The etheric body of this person, having detached and returned, never again fits with the same rigidity into the physical body. A gap remains, a scar of light through which spiritual intuition flows constantly. They become citizens of two worlds. These 8 trials are merely the initial symptoms, the occurrences of the vestibule of death. But what happens when the visitor does not return? What occurs when the silver cord is definitively severed and the physical body is left to decompose? The real journey, the great odyssey of the soul through the planetary spheres, the confrontation with one's own shadows in Kamaloka, and the preparation for the return to Earth are even deeper mysteries. In the next part of this investigation, we will enter territories that medicine cannot reach. We will explore the evidence of eyeless vision in the congenitally blind, terminal lucidity in destroyed brains, and, guided by the steady hand of Rudolf Steiner, we will trace the complete map of what awaits you and all of us when the light of this world fades so that the true light may shine. The death of materialism was only the beginning. Now we need to understand the life of the spirit. We have crossed the threshold. In the first part of this investigation, we dismantled the materialistic illusion with the first 8 pieces of evidence for the survival of consciousness. We saw the mind operate without the brain, pain disappear, and time collapse. But we are still on the edge of the abyss. What happens now? When the last physical bandage is cut, the remaining evidence we will explore is not merely curious phenomena. It is the master key that unlocks the doors to the spiritual cosmos, revealing an architecture so vast and precise that it makes our earthly life seem like a brief rehearsal on a dark stage. We've arrived at the 9th piece of evidence, a phenomenon that medical science, in its most brutal honesty, admits is inexplicable. The vision in the blind, mind sight. Imagine someone born in total darkness with atrophied or non-existent optic nerves. This person lacks the cerebral concept of color, depth, or light. Yet upon crossing the threshold of death, they see, and they don't see blurs. They see details. Documented accounts show congenitally blind people describing the colors of doctors' clothing, the brightness of instruments, and the architecture of the hospital. How can the brain hallucinate images it never had the biological capacity to process? Rudolf Steiner would smile at this paradox. He teaches us that physical vision is merely a crude specialization, a temporary crutch for the dense world. True vision belongs to the astral body. We are beings made of light. The eyes are merely windows we open in the flesh. When the house of flesh falls, the window shatters, but the light remains. The blind person sees because, in death, they become all eye, all perception. The deficiency was in the vehicle, not the driver. And if sight returns, what about the broken mind? The 10th proof is the disturbing one. Terminal clarity in nursing homes and hospitals. A silent phenomenon is observed. Patients with advanced Alzheimer's, severe dementia, or brains destroyed by tumors. People who have spent years in a vegetative state, disconnected from reality, suddenly, hours before death, wake up. They converse, recognize children they had forgotten, give lucid advice, and emanate a radiant peace. And then they die. If the mind were the brain, how could necrotic neural tissue magically repair itself for one last act? The anthroposophical answer is surgical. The brain does not generate consciousness, it anchors it. Organic mental illness is a defect in the anchor, not in the ship. As death approaches, the etheric body begins to detach from the physical brain. The soul no longer needs to force its way through damaged neurons. It begins to act directly. Terminal lucidity is the sun of the soul shining through the cracks of a crumbling wall. This is definitive proof that the self remains intact, immaculate, awaiting only the liberation of the broken instrument. But the moment of total separation demands a break. The 11th proof leads us to the heart of biblical and Eastern esotericism, the silver cord, described in Ecclesiastes 12:6 and visualized by seers throughout the centuries. This is not a metaphor. Threshold travelers describe an elastic, luminous, and pulsating thread that maintains the connection between the floating spiritual body and the inert physical body. Steiner describes this link as the vital channel through which the etheric body nourishes the physical. While it remains intact, return is possible. Resurrection on the operating table can happen, but when it breaks, often described as a painless but definitive snap, death is consummated. The proof here is the mechanical consistency of the accounts, the description of its texture, its luminosity, and the point of connection, frequently in the head or solar plexus. Materialism would not invent a biological energy cable. The soul sees it because it is the ultimate frontier of occult biology. Death, however, reverberates. The 12th proof, the shared death experiences. This shows us that death is a field event, not just an individual one. Healthy family members, sitting beside the dying person's bed, report suddenly leaving their bodies and accompanying their loved one part of the way through the tunnel. They see light, feel peace, and observe the vital mist leaving the body. How to explain a collective and synchronized hallucination? This suggests that death creates a zone of singularity, a disturbance in the ether that can be perceived by any consciousness attuned to love. Steiner speaks of the spiritual atmosphere surrounding the deathbed, where hierarchical beings descend. Love creates resonance. It tunes souls to the same vibrational frequency, allowing the living to glimpse, for a brief instant, the majesty of departure. We move on to the 13th piece of evidence, the universality in children. Very young children, 2 or 3 years old, who do not yet possess a cultural vocabulary about angels, tunnels, or heaven, report exactly the same experiences as adults. They speak of bright friends, warm lights, and flying. This refutes the skeptical theory that NDEs are a projection of cultural or religious expectations. The child reports what they see, unfiltered. In Steiner's view, children up to the age of 7 still live in a dream-wake state, with their subtle bodies not yet fully embodied. They are, naturally, closer to the threshold. Their accounts are the voice of uncorrupted truth. And where do these souls go? The 14th proof tells us about cities of light and libraries of knowledge. Many returnees describe crystal structures, libraries where knowledge is not read but absorbed, and temples of music where sound constructs form. This corroborates the concept of the Akashic records and Devachan, the mental world. Steiner describes heaven not as an idle cloud, but as a place of intense creative activity. There, the archetypes of everything that exists on Earth, plants, animals, inventions, are drawn. The cities seen in NDEs are glimpses of the workshops of the gods, where human souls collaborate in the architecture of the future. Finally, the 15th proof is the handshake between mysticism and science. The quantum physics and non-locality modern theories, such as Penrose and Hameroff's Or-Kachor, suggest that consciousness operates at a quantum level in the brain's microtubules. When biological activity ceases, quantum information is not destroyed. Because information cannot be destroyed in the quantum universe, it simply returns to the cosmos. Secular science is rediscovering what anthroposophy has always affirmed. Spirit is the fundamental substance. Matter is merely condensed spirit. But what happens after? What about trials? When does the silver cord break and the movie of life end? Steiner guides us to the next phase, the dreaded and necessary one, Kamaloka. After the dissolution of the etheric body, which lasts about 3 days, the soul is left only with its astral body and itself. Now, it enters the world of souls. Kamaloka is the place of purification. Here, we live our life again, but on the contrary, from death to birth, and with a crucial difference. We don't feel what we feel. We feel what the others. They felt it because of us. If you hurt someone with a harsh word, in Kamaloka you don't remember the word. You feels the pain that word caused in the other person's heart. You become a victim of yourself. It's a purifying fire. Steiner says we burn our selfish desires in this fire until the soul is cleansed. It's not punishment. It's rebalancing. It's the only way we can truly learn that we are all one. Having overcome Kamaloka, the soul discards the astral body, the second death, and ascends as pure spirit to Devachan. Then begins the great journey through the planetary spheres. Steiner describes this not as a space voyage, but as an expansion of consciousness. First, the moon sphere, where we leave behind our immediate earthly memory. Then Mercury, where we cure moral ills. In Venus, we absorb divine love. Then we arrive at Sun, the center of the spiritual world, where we find the cosmic Christ and the great guides of humanity. It is a sphere of absolute clarity. We continue to Marte, where we receive the power of the creative word. Jupiter, where we learn cosmic wisdom. And Saturn, where we contemplate the memory of the entire universe. Finally, we arrived at cosmic midnight, the turning point. The soul, now filled with stellar wisdom, feels a new calling, the desire to evolve, to correct mistakes, to love again. It begins the descent. It gathers substance from the stars to form a new astral body, a new etheric body. It chooses, with the help of superior beings, its future parents, not by chance, but by destiny. It sees the trials it will face and courageously accepts the chalice of new life. Conception occurs. The veil of forgetfulness falls. A baby is born, and the journey begins again. These 15 proofs are merely cracks in the door. The reality is that death does not exist. What exists is a continuous and majestic transformation. Life on Earth is the school. Life in the afterlife is home. Now that you know the proof is there, the question is no longer if there is life after death. The question is, how will you live now, knowing that every thought, every act, and every feeling will echo through eternity? If this revelation has expanded your consciousness, your journey is only beginning. Subscribe to the channel to continue unveiling the mysteries that history has hidden. The truth is here. Until the next awakening.